Hello, this is the view looking east from the Yueyang Mountains, old volcanoes. South at the moment we're looking into the Port Phillip Bay, and then as we move further looking east we'll eventually pick up the skyscrapers of Melbourne, which I guess you can't really see on this video, but they're there straight ahead in the middle of the picture at the moment. Glorious day. It is Saturday the 7th. No, I'll have a look at my watch. Or is it the 8th of... It's the 8th of April. Would you believe it? A lovely autumn day in Victoria. Hello, Jim 12's here, and today I want to start a study into the battle, if you like, between globalism and nationalism. I'm here on the eastern side of the Yueyang Mountains on a glorious autumn afternoon on the 8th of April. And behind me, through the trees, you can make out the skyscrapers of Melbourne. So, let's get going. Globalism versus nationalism. Now, the first part, let me just have a look at a few of the aspects of globalism that seem to work, seem to resonate with me, and I think I'm beginning to understand, but I've got a lot more to do, I'm sure. Let me start off by reminding us of the Tower of Babel in the Bible, Genesis, where the people wanted to remove God from their lives, and they were basically wanting to set up a one world government, one world order. And God's response was to confuse the people and set up separate languages, nations, and bring their global agendas to nothing. So with that background, let's talk a few things about globalism. The first one I want to mention is I grew up being very familiar and comfortable with the corner shop that basically sold ice cream, sold anything. And over the years, over the decades, the corner shop has been swallowed up or driven out of business by the supermarkets and the so-called aim of the economies of scale. So the small guy on the corner couldn't make it any longer, didn't have enough buying power. Then let's consider national brands that would only be found in a particular nation. They got gobbled up and became multinational brands, and now I think most of our produce, particularly our food, is managed by multinationals. Now let's have a look at the anti-monopoly laws. Now, when I was a lad, they were always in the news because companies were getting too big and getting a monopoly of the market, and that was deemed to be a bad thing. But over the years, I think the anti-monopoly laws have become toothless. And moving on from that, what used to be so important was to establish that there be no conflict of interest between operators, and there be a free and just economic landscape. Well, I think that's gone out of the window too, and in its place has come the corporate integration and complementarity. Corporate integration and complementarity, that's now far more important than recognizing conflict of interest. So that's a few thoughts on business. Let's have a look at some global organizations. The World Economic Forum, that kicked off in the 1970s in Switzerland. The World Health Organization, which now covers every continent, I guess, including Antarctica. The United Nations, that arguably came out of World War II, but I would argue is the arm for the United States. So yes, we've got those global organizations, but there's no overall one world government per se, with representatives from national governments elected to go to the one world government. That doesn't exist. But we do have very, very powerful global organizations. Let's have a look at global agendas. Now, I think the main overarching global agenda is the defeat of capitalism. It's seen as evil and divisive, and along with that, the defeat of the Judaeo-Christian values. I may be wrong, but I believe that is an overarching global agenda that we can't get rid of. We can't deny. And in its place, what do the globalists want? Totalitarianism, a state, if you like, a worldwide communism. And the phrase that I'm sure we've all heard, we shall own nothing and be happy. And that's the tagline, if you like, for the Great Reset. What are the globalists' methods? I would argue that fear is a major one. If they can get the people afraid, and the answer to that fear is the state, and they get people submitted to that government as a solution, they've got control. So submission leading to control. Let me talk about the control of energy. Now, while fossil fuel is the dominant source of energy for the world's population, that's actually in control of the nation state that happens to have the resources. And therefore, that's capitalism. So if the globalists can do anything to destroy the dependence on fossil fuels, they've also destroyed capitalism, and they've destroyed the nation state. If you have green fuel, that can be controlled, distributed globally. So they can authorize the setting up of wind, solar, hydro, whatever. It's funny that they don't want to set up nuclear, which would be so efficient. But I'll leave you to ponder that one. Next one on the methods, let's talk about currencies. At the moment, we've got, I would argue, the end of the dominance of the American dollar. And it's almost as if it's beginning to die. And arguably the big rivals are the Russian currency and the Chinese, and who will win. But if the globalists have their way, let's have cryptocurrency, as in it's entirely in a computer and it's entirely at the whim of the globalists. And it's not a state currency at all. So watch for cryptocurrencies. And finally, in my review of some of the methods, the removal of democracy. Western nations at the moment seem to have only one party states, as in the Liberals and the Labour. The Conservatives and the left wing are really, even though they may have different badges, but they are the same, and you can't poke a stick between the two. And that is just like Russia or China in this regard. And everybody calls those dictatorships, but who would dare to call a Western country a dictatorship just because it's got the same type of government? I think the only country that still has two-party is America, Democrat and Republican, and that's bitterly divided. So watch this space. So that's my little review of globalism. I'm watching the sky because a shower may be coming down. So let me talk a little bit about nationalism. I'll start off by, if you like, some views of nationalism from the globalists, and then get into the positives. The globalists always seek to radicalize nationalism as extreme nationalism, and therefore it's a bad thing. They align it to fascism, to neo-Nazism, to white supremacy, to racial bigotry, and paint it as a really bad light. But is nationalism so evil, so right-wing, so extreme? I don't think so. I think the vast majority of people who would actually love nationalism are not extreme at all. They're actually quite conservative, like me. Number two, the globalists want to remove national boundaries, which arguably is the boundary of a nation. They want free flow of people, a mix-up of all the cultures and a dilution of all the values. Nationalists, on the other hand, want to control their boundaries. They want to protect their borders from illegal import of drugs. Why not? They want to protect their borders from illegal immigrants and terrorists. Well, wouldn't you want to do that? They want to protect their borders from mass migration that will actually eat up their national resources and mean a complete revolution for the nation's own people, because their own people won't have enough resources to go around. Nationalists want to control their own economy. They want to control their own natural resources, whatever they might happen to be, mineral or energy or farming or forestry or fisheries. They want to support domestic industry and not have to rely on a global import stream. They want to control their own domestic currency. Why not? And with that freedom, why not set up free trade agreements with the nations that they want to trade with and would make sense to trade with? Nationalists celebrate democracy. Government for the people, by the people. And let's add there a multi-party election. It's democracy. It's what World War II was fought for, and countless lives were sacrificed for that goal. Nationalists celebrate personal responsibility, and they really want to encourage personal responsibility, and I think that is absolutely fantastic. The parents, for example, having a choice about the education of their own children. A patient having choice over who and where they'll get medical help from, without it being a one-size-fits-all come down from on high government. The nationalists want to care for their environment because it's their land. They want to make sure that they have sustainable fisheries, sustainable farming, sustainable forestry, and all well and good too. Nationalists celebrate cultural identity, and here a biblical phrase comes to mind: bring up your children in the way they should go, so that when they are old they will not depart from it. Where is that in a globalist agenda? It's not there at all. And finally, nationalists celebrate freedom in its full depth. And that doesn't mean to say license to do what you like, but freedom of choice, freedom of conscience, freedom to go here and go there when we want to, as long as it doesn't violate national rules. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and certainly I would love to live in a community that was first and foremost Australian. Yes, this is my adopted country, but and my first nation was England, but as you may gather from my accent, but there's nothing like being responsible for the land you're living on and taking up space on. And I certainly do not feel comfortable with a globalist agenda which really has no representation from me whatsoever. Love your comments. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. I'd love you to, and spread this message of the dichotomy between globalism and nationalism as far as you can. Have a lovely day. Bye for now.